The 911 Association, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. For those who are viewing this in the webinar format, there's a question box appearing on your screen. You can type questions during the course of the presentation. We'll try to get to these questions at the end of the presentation. We'd like to bring to everyone's attention that NENA will be launching a new website starting on Monday, October 17. I encourage you to go to that website for additional information, not only regarding this webinar, but other activities involving NENA. Today I'm honored to introduce Patrick Donovan. Patrick is an attorney advisor in the Policy Division of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission. Patrick is also the Bureau's 911 and Next Generation 911 team leader. And he's going to talk to you about the important Notice of Proposed Rulemaking regarding Next Generation 911 that the Commission adopted earlier in September. So Patrick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as Brian mentioned, is Patrick Donovan, and I am an attorney in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau at the FCC. In this role, as Brian also mentioned, I focus primarily on 911 and next generation 911 matters. And today I'm going to discuss the FCC's role on NG9-1-1 matters and provide a summary of the NG9-1-1 Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or NPRM, that we just released last month. Before I start one of these presentations on 911 issues at the FCC, I always like to begin by clarifying that on 911 and NG9-1-1 matters, the FCC is responsible for regulating carriers and not PSAPs. So we don't tell PSAPs what to do. We don't have the authority to do that. States and localities are responsible for running PSAPs. As you can probably imagine, this division of responsibility has made it very difficult to develop a consistent and coordinated regulatory approach on a number of 911 issues, and particularly in regard to the deployment of NG9-1-1. All right, so by way of background, in December 2010, the FCC took its first major step into exploring issues related to the deployment of next generation 911. At this time, in December of 2010, we released our NG9-1-1 Notice of Inquiry. A Notice of Inquiry, or NOI, is a fact-finding exercise in which the FCC asks a number of questions and seeks feedback from the public. In this NOI that we released in December, we teed up just about every NG9-1-1 issue under the sun. And we focused on four, I would say, primary issues. The first being the capabilities that NG9-1-1 will support, such as text, photos, video, telemetry, etc. The NG9-1-1 network architecture, issues associated with the implementation and transition to NG9-1-1, and the proper roles of the FCC, other federal agencies, and state, tribal, and local governments. We received comments in response to the NOI in January of this year, and our analysis of the record demonstrated that there is an urgent need for consumers to be able to text to 911 during an emergency, and that the ability to text to 911 is especially critical for people with disabilities. As a result of our analysis, we decided to have our NPRM focus on text to 911 and other NG9-1-1 solutions. Before I get to the NPRM, I would also like to note that in August, the chairman at the APCO conference announced his NG9-1-1 5-step plan, and I will just briefly run through those 5 steps now. First of these steps was to develop location accuracy mechanisms for NG9-1-1, and we addressed this step in our July further notice of proposed rulemaking. This further notice focused on location issues, location accuracy issues, not only in the NG9-1-1 context, but in the legacy context as well. The second step was to enable consumers to send text, photos, and videos to PSAPs. Of course, we addressed this, we began to address this in the NPRM that I will be discussing that we just released in September. The third step was to develop an NG9-1-1 funding model. I'm not going to be discussing this today, but I'm sure NENA has a link to it on its website. I know the FCC webpage does. But in September, we released an NG9-1-1 cost study. I would like to note also that this cost study only deals with connectivity issues. It does not deal with in-house PSAP costs. It strictly deals with connectivity issues. And so this, in no way does this cost study reflect the total cost of deploying NG9-1-1. But the FCC thought it would be helpful to use it as at least a line item or something to get the conversation started. And so we released this cost study. Just to summarize, we released the cost study last month at the same time as we released the NPRM. It's available on the Commission's website, and I'm sure that NENA has a link to it as well. The fourth step in the plan was to facilitate the completion and implementation of NG9-1-1 technical standards. That work is ongoing. And then finally, the fifth step is to develop an NG9-1-1 governance framework, and that work is also ongoing. So now I'm going to move on to the NPRM, which we released last month. And I'd also like to note that just yesterday it was published in the Federal Register, which means that comments are due to the FCC on December 12th, and reply comments are due on January 10th, 2012. So that we just released a public notice yesterday upon publication in the Federal Register. So those dates are now set, December 12th and January 10th. All right, so the NPRM begins by reviewing the status of current and upcoming text-to-911 trials, and then seeks comment on the prospects for the evolution of NG9-1-1, both in the short term and the long term. We decided to break the NPRM up into two separate categories, the short-term solutions and the long-term solutions, because after reviewing the record in response to the December NOI, we realized that it is extremely critical for consumers to have access to text-to-911 solutions as quickly as possible. And again, this is particularly important for people with disabilities. What we have realized is that, unfortunately, true IP-based NG9-1-1 solutions that we all think about when we discuss NG9-1-1 will not be available for a number of years. And so the Commission thought it would be important to include a section in the NPRM that discusses potential short-term solutions that would enable consumers to text to 911 in the near future. So again, just to clarify, in the NPRM, we have one section that deals with the short-term deployment of NG9-1-1 type solution, or short-term deployment of text to 911. And then another section that deals with the long-term deployment of NG9-1-1 type solutions that include photos, video, telemetry, etc. So I'll start with the short-term section. Short-term options for text to 911 may include SMS-based texting or software-based approaches. And we discuss both of those options in the NPRM. The NPRM discusses Intrado's SMS to 911 trials in Black Hawk County, Iowa, and Durham, North Carolina. And it also discusses Cassidian's completion of a simulation SMS to 911 trial in Harris County, Texas. The NPRM notes that SMS to 911 is probably not an appropriate long-term solution for several reasons, but primarily because it does not support two-way real-time communication. It does not provide precise location information, and it does not support the delivery of additional media, such as photos, video, and data. At the same time, we also made it clear in the NPRM that SMS to 911 offers significant potential benefits as an interim solution. For example, SMS to 911 can be deployed relatively quickly. Consumers have already embraced the technology, and also the vast majority of wireless providers and mobile devices support SMS. So what we're looking for in the comments that are filed in response to this NPRM is not another lengthy discussion on the limitations of SMS. The FCC is already aware of these limitations and certainly appreciates and understands those limitations, and will factor into any FCC decision. But we already know what those limitations are. What we would like to see is a discussion of whether the benefits of leveraging SMS to 911 on an interim basis outweigh the limitations of SMS that I previously mentioned. So again, we're not, as some of you might know, 4G Americas, which is a group that represents carriers and manufacturers, submitted a white paper to the FCC last year, a very detailed white paper noting the limitations of SMS to 911. And the white paper was very informative, and in their comments, wireless carrier, in the comments in response to the December NOI, carriers that submitted filings also highlighted these limitations of SMS to 911. We appreciate those limitations and understand them, but what we're looking for here is a discussion of whether the benefits of having SMS, which can be done relatively quickly, outweigh the limitations of SMS. In the short-term section, we also see comment on the feasibility of using 911-specific software-based applications as a short-term solution. This approach would also have several potential benefits, many of the same type of benefits that SMS would bring, including the fact that it could be rolled out in a short period of time, and that it would not require any major network or handset upgrades. In the NPRM, we see comment on a number of questions related to the use of software-based applications for text to 911. We then change course before we get to the long-term section, and we see comment on the ability of carriers to prioritize 911 traffic during major emergencies. The recent East Coast earthquake and Hurricane Irene demonstrated that concentrated demands on the capacity of commercial communications networks during and after major emergencies can hinder the ability of consumers to make voice calls. This can, in turn, of course, jeopardize consumers' ability to contact 911. In the NPRM, we seek comment on how best to address this concern in both legacy and emerging broadband networks. So what is the ability of carriers to prioritize 911 traffic? So now moving on to the long-term section. The long-term options for NG9-1-1 can include IP-based technologies that are capable of delivering real-time text, photos, videos, and other data to PSAPs. In the NPRM, we see comment on the ongoing activities of standard-setting bodies and note 3 specific efforts in particular. The NENA architecture, which is based on IETF protocols, ADIS's efforts, and 3GPP's efforts. NENA has previously noted to us that NENA and 3GPP requirements must be aligned to make NG9-1-1 available. In the NPRM, we therefore seek comment on whether an alignment is necessary, and if so, how much time is needed to effectuate such an alignment. As probably many of you know, and as I previously discussed, in response to the December NOI, carriers generally argued that SMS to 911 should not be part of the NG9-1-1 framework, and that carriers should be given additional time to develop standards for IP-based emergency services. As I noted before, the Commission believes that time is of the essence when it comes to enabling consumers to text to 911. So in last month's NPRM, we see comment on specific time frames in which standards will likely be completed for real-time text and other IP-based solutions. And we ask how much additional time will be needed for carriers to implement these solutions. We then have a section that seeks comment on what role the FCC should play in expediting the deployment of NG9-1-1 text and multimedia. And we include both a discussion on regulatory and non-regulatory measures that can be taken. We begin by asking whether there are any incentive-based approaches that the FCC could adopt that would encourage the rapid deployment of NG9-1-1. It's probably obvious, but even if carriers upgraded their networks tomorrow, let's say, it wouldn't do any good, of course, if PSAPs weren't able to receive this information, to receive the NG9-1-1 information. Since PSAPs will need certain equipment and operational procedures in place to receive text and other media types, the NPRM seeks comment on the degree to which PSAP readiness should be factored in to Commission action, and whether PSAP readiness should be a condition to the FCC's regulation of carriers. As most of you know, our Phase 1 and Phase 2 wireless E911 rules require a PSAP to show that it is capable of receiving location information before a wireless carrier is obligated to provide a PSAP with location information. In the NPRM, we see comment on whether a similar process would be appropriate in the NG9-1-1 context. If so, we ask what showing should a PSAP be required to make to show that it is ready for NG9-1-1 information. The Commission has an advisory committee that is about to start back up called the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council. And as part of, which we refer to as CISRIC, I don't want to have to repeat that again, but as part of CISRIC, they have a working group, which is co-chaired by Brian Fontes of NENA, that will be exploring what sort of showing a PSAP may be required to make to show that it is ready for NG9-1-1 deployment. I would also like to note that we here at the FCC recognize that the deployment of E911 on a PSAP by PSAP basis had its flaws. And now that we have over 6,800 PSAPs, we realize that it would be extremely difficult for carriers to deploy NG9-1-1 solutions on a PSAP by PSAP basis. For this reason, in the NPRM, we ask whether we should assess PSAP readiness at the state or regional level rather than at the individual PSAP level. We recognize that state and regional entities will be playing a significant role in the deployment of NG9-1-1. And in the NPRM, we see comment on how best to leverage this fact. So we have a whole section dedicated to a regional approach or state approach and ask whether the Commission should consider legal or regional entities as part of a PSAP readiness question. We also see comment on any legal or regulatory barriers that may exist at the state or local level that could hinder the deployment of NG9-1-1. Brian and Trey at NENA have done a great job over the past few years of making sure that the FCC and the states are aware of these outdated regulations. And we're certainly aware that some of the FCC's regulations are outdated and need to be updated for NG9-1-1 deployment. And in the NPRM, we see comment on what the Commission can do to encourage states and localities to eliminate these outdated regulations. Finally, in the NPRM, we have a section on managing consumer expectations. And this is because the transition to NG9-1-1 will not be a flash cut. There will be certain parts of the country where consumers will be able to text to 911, and there will simultaneously be parts of the country where consumers will not be able to text to 911. We ask how this should be handled. And we see comment on how best to educate consumers about this local availability or unavailability of text to 911. We also ask whether carriers should be required to provide consumers with an automatic error message when a consumer attempts to text to 911 in an area where 911 isn't available. So right now, I think that I'm pretty sure that if you try sending a text message to 911, certain carriers will write back and tell you, no, call 911, or certain carriers won't even, there's nothing that comes back to you. We ask whether a certain response should be standardized, or how we should go about doing this. What responsibility should carriers have to inform their consumers that a text message to 911 will not go through in this particular location. So again, I moved much more quickly here than I thought I would. I guess there's more time for Q&A though. We look forward to hearing from all of you, and comments will be due on December 12th. Reply comments will be due on January 10th, and I'll be here to answer any of your questions now. Thank you.
Okay, Patrick, thank you so much for your time today and going through this presentation. And now I'd like to open it up to questions that we may have. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who can actually read the screen.
Okay, the first question we have is, Patrick, would you comment on the relationship of NG9-1-1 with the FCC's National Broadband Plan?
Well, in the National Broadband Plan, we had several recommendations on how to, on what should be done to further NG9-1-1 deployment. One thing in particular I'd like to note is that we recommended Congress allocate funding so that DOT could do a more in-depth cost study analysis. Congress has yet to allocate these funds, but we continue to encourage and believe that a cost study at DOT would be, or the ICO office, I'm sorry, which is made up of DOT and Department of Commerce, would be an excellent step to further the deployment of NG9-1-1.
Thank you, Patrick. And
sorry, also just wanted to clarify too that these proceedings that we released came out of the National Broadband Plan. And so the National Broadband Plan recommended that the FCC adopt a proceeding to examine NG9-1-1 issues. That is what ultimately spurred the notice of inquiry in December, and then also the notice of proposed rulemaking last month.
That's exactly what. No, that's exactly what I was going to mention, was that on Chapter 16 of the National Broadband Plan is a reference, quite a bit of a reference to Next Generation 911, and the Commission also indicated that they would be launching a series of proceedings from that, and hence they have. So hopefully that answered the question. Chris, is there another question?
Yes. Is the Commission looking for PSAPs to weigh in on how they will prioritize or handle incoming requests, voice and data, or is the FCC just looking for carrier input on prioritizing text versus voice?
We are looking for both. The more information you could give us on those fronts, the better.
Okay. Next question is, when will CISRIC working groups start actual work, and when will they be completed?
I'll punt to Brian on that one.
Yeah, I can answer that. Actually, Lori Flaherty, Department of Transportation, and myself, we chair Working Group 1, or co-chair Working Group 1. They have already begun their work, and they've already started a series of conference calls. I know that other working groups in CISRIC are already meeting via Conference Bridge, and also some are planning in-person meetings. So the work is beginning on CISRIC. So if you are involved and have not heard from your co-chair of your working group, please contact that co-chair to make sure you're on the distribution list for the various meetings that are being held by the working groups within CISRIC.
Okay, next
one additional point. I'm sorry, Chris. One additional point to Brian's point there. Brian is the co-chair of the NG9-1-1 working group, which is the most relevant for what we're discussing today. And then there's also another working group that is dealing with 911 location information, and particularly right now, testing location information. And I'm the FCC liaison to that working group. and or testing the accuracy of location information. I'm the liaison to that FCC working group as well, and we just started meeting last week, and we'll be having another number of meetings coming up over the next few months.
Patrick, is that working group 3?
That is working. You know what? I'm not. Sadly,
yeah,
I don't.
know. There's several working groups.
It's the old 4C. I can't remember what the new number is. I'm pretty sure it's 3, but I don't want to say it is and then mess up.
Yeah.
Steve Wisely from APCO is the co-chair of that.
Yep. Okay, Chris.
Okay. Next is a comment and a question. National trials are important. Can you reach out to the state commissions and meet to address how to at least facilitate NG9-1-1 trials without barriers?
We already have been reaching out to state commissions. In fact, Brian and I just got back from Hawaii last couple weeks ago, meeting with their state commission and their local public safety folks. David Firth, the Deputy Bureau Chief in the Public Safety Homeland Security Bureau, was at the state of California that same week. We're going to continue to have interaction with the states, and we certainly agree with what you what you say, the importance of trials, and we see comment in the NPRM on how the commission can improve our efforts to work with the states.
Great. Okay. Is the commission open to non-SMS-based approaches to facilitating text to 911?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. I guess the reason why SMS, I talked more about SMS than anything else, is that when it comes to the short-term deployment of text to 911, SMS is one of the most likely solutions. But as far as the long-term deployment goes, you know, there are a number of other solutions. And if there are any short-term solutions other than SMS, we certainly welcome to hear more about that.
Great. The next question is about funding. Does the commission have a model or recommendation to facilitate the initial deployment and ongoing operation of NG9-1-1?
As I mentioned, we released our cost study in September, just last month. That is on the FCC's website, but that only deals with connectivity. It does not deal with the in-house PSAP costs, and so it's only a portion of the NG9-1-1 costs. But I encourage all of you to take a look at that cost study, and we think it will be a great tool to at least get the conversation started and to get an idea generally of certain costs.
And funding is certainly a critical issue with all of us here at NENA. And I know that up on the Hill, Congresswoman Eshoo and Congressman Shimkus has introduced legislation that would provide some funding over a 5-year time period. And I'm meeting with both of these individuals tomorrow morning. And we continue at NENA to advocate for funding. Next question, Chris.
Okay. Has anyone started going state to state to start talking about the regulatory barriers? Is there anything that county and local people can do to start this process?
The FCC, we have not started going state to state, for instance, but we have, we're always welcome, we're always looking forward to meeting with states. Of course, we don't have the resources here to go around state to state to talk to them about it, but I think Brian and his team are doing a great job of that, and I'll let Brian take it from here.
Sure, sure, and we've raised this very issue with the chairman of the FCC in large part because he has the opportunity at certain meetings to meet with the state counterparts in terms of regulatory agencies. And the issue of ensuring that regulation and state laws are modified where appropriate to enable next generation 911 is something he's very much aware of, the chairman. I've also had the opportunity of speaking to the association that represents a lot of the state regulatory agencies, NARUC. I spoke to them at their meeting this past winter. They meet every 6 months, and I plan to continue to meet with them constantly with respect to ensuring that regulations, where appropriate, are modified to enable next generation 911 and also to work with state legislators to modify laws where they exist that tend to inhibit rather than enable next generation 911. That's another question.
Yes. Does the Commission intend to release additional NPRMs regarding separate specific areas within NG9-1-1?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the chairman, but I can say on behalf of the Bureau that, or I can't speak on behalf of the chairman or the commissioners, but from a Bureau perspective, yes, we do plan to release additional NPRMs on other NG9-1-1 issues. You know, as I mentioned, the NOI that we released in December was very broad-based and teed up every issue under the sun. We then took what we thought was a critical issue from the NOI, texting to 911, and broke it out to make this NPRM. But we intend to take some of those other issues that we teed up in the NOI and break them out into separate NPRMs. And so I would say there's a very good chance that additional NPRMs on NG9-1-1 will be coming.
And Patrick, for those that do follow the FCC, typically when they do issue an NOI, you will see a series of NPRMs follow from that, and I think Patrick articulated that very well. And I know that the chairman has issued his 5-point plan that identifies areas where additional work needs to be done, and he's addressed quite a few of them, but not all of them. So that would give an indication that there will be additional work coming out of the Commission.
Okay. What can technology providers do to help the Commission as a unified voice? Any particular audiences that should be addressed?
Any particular audiences that should be addressed? My guess there is that what you mean is where should they address their concerns? And I would say right now the best way to address or to provide us with information would be to file comments and reply comments.
Well, I think the question is more of what can providers do to help the Commission? Who should they be reaching out to and speaking to?
Oh, okay, beyond just the FCC.
Yeah.
Of course, state PUCs, and then also work with local public safety folks as well. You know, but yeah, I would say that beyond the FCC, which is my purview, of course, I would say with NG9-1-1 being such a state and local issue, that the more you can deal with the states and localities, the better.
Great, and I'd just like to underscore what Patrick said. For those who are interested in participating in the FCC, it's always good to make sure you have comments or reply comments filed, and then after that ex partes, so that your thoughts and opinions actually become part of the record.
Yep.
Next question. Okay.
Is the FCC open to social media application interfaces for texting to 911, or is the main focus on wireless carriers?
That is something we will definitely consider and are open to hearing more about.
Okay, great. Would the FCC or NENA be willing to sponsor, quote, hackathon, where teams of designers, engineers, carriers, product managers, et cetera, come together to design, develop, and launch their visions for texting? I think you know, NENA has worked on a number of NG9-1-1 they call our ICE events, and Brian can speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, but I think the real question here is, will the FCC facilitate these types of collective gatherings, if you will, of technologists and others in attempting to develop solutions? And Patrick, before you respond to that, typically the Commission prefers that companies out there develop their solutions and ultimately present them to the Commission. But Patrick, you may have a different opinion.
No, I would agree with what Brian says, but then also we are planning to have several summits over the next year or so on NG9-1-1 type solutions, and are even possibly exploring looking into whether maybe an academic institution would like to showcase a summit on NG9-1-1 as well. So we're very much into these summits and showcases of particular technologies, and we'll work more on that for sure.
Great. Does the Commission have a position on sunsetting technology such as TTY once NG9-1-1 is available?
That is the sunset of TTY isn't an issue that comes across in my bureau, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Any sort of discussion or consideration of a sunset of TTY would be handled in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and so I'm not aware of anything along those lines. What I can say is that we are right now conducting, as out of the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, I probably butchered that, CVAA, we're holding, over the past 9 months or so, we have been holding the Emergency Access Advisory Committee, which is an advisory committee that is made up of people with disabilities, leaders of that community, and vendors and carriers on developing recommendations that will be submitted to the FCC on how to ensure that people with disabilities have access to the NG9-1-1 network, and recognizing that TTYs are becoming more and more obsolete. And so we actually, our next meeting is tomorrow. That you can view the meeting on the Commission's website, and we are as I said, the committee is specifically looking into recommendations that will be submitted to the FCC to ensure that people with disabilities have access to the NG9-1-1 network.
Great. And just for those, again, who follow the FCC, when it comes to sunsetting technologies, it's usually a very thorough, lengthy process before sunset actually occurs. For an example, in the high-definition television world, that proceeding of HDTV started in 1987, but the rules weren't sunsetted until just, what, 2 years ago or 3 years ago for analog service. Likewise, it took a while to sunset analog wireless services as well, commercial wireless services. So the Commission does a pretty thorough review before sunsetting technologies to ensure that consumers are not harmed by any sunsets. Is there another question?
What assistance, if any, can the Commission offer states wishing to perform an NG9-1-1 funding and cost study?
We're not a funding agency, so when it comes to funding questions, I think the best place for you to look would be, for you to start, would be the cost study we did last month, but then also hold a meeting with the Commission. We can get you in touch with the right industry folks. We went through the initial stages of a cost study on the connectivity issues, but if an individual state is looking to meet with the FCC or is looking to hold its own cost study, I think the best path forward would be to first meet with the Commission. We can talk to you about the work we've done and also give you the appropriate contacts at these agencies, at these associations and companies.
Right. Is there a national survey of state NG9-1-1 readiness, or is one in the works?
National survey of NG9-1 state readiness. I know the FCC has not done a survey on that. Brian,
this is Brian. I know that, Patrick, I'll just let you know that there is currently underway efforts to assess where states are in their development of policies, regulations, models, and eventually funding for next generation 911. In fact, NENA has been working with NASNA and an outside party, and there'll be some additional information requested going out later today.
Great.
What work is the FCC doing to ensure the carrier networks are secure from flooding, denial of service, or other attacks which could impact PSAPs?
We, right now we have, that's I think going to be incorporated into the standards that are developed for NG9-1-1. And we had a section in the December notice of inquiry on security issues. Security isn't something that we explored too in depth in this notice of proposed rulemaking because we had to have it more focused. However, the Commission does recognize that security is a major concern in NG9-1-1, and so it's something we're considering. We haven't necessarily done any specific work on that yet, but we'll be sure to address that before any rules are implemented.
Sure. Again, for those who follow the Commission, the last CISRIC, I think it was Working Group 8, addressed security issues in a broader context, but much of the concern and issues that were raised and potential solutions for addressing security has some applicability in the next generation 911 context as well. Okay.
You mentioned the existing trials around SMS to 911. Does the Commission wish to encourage more trials over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yes. Yeah, we would love to see more trials, and specifically we would like to see more trials. As some of you probably know, Intrato's SMS to 911 trials in Blackhawk County and Durham only involved one carrier in each location, and where Blackhawk County is a relatively small location. Durham is a little bit bigger, but still relatively small location as well. We would love to see an SMS to 911 trial with multiple carriers, and as many as possible across the country. But we'd also like to see it in a larger municipality as well too. But again, we encourage any sort of trial, and we would love to see the results and specific data from those trials that we can incorporate into our rulemaking proceeding would be especially helpful as well.
Great. Are private companies who provide E911 service for their employees going to be expected to follow the future FCC rules for NG9-1-1?
Private companies that provide E911 service to their employees.
I guess on a campus or an office complex.
Well, we haven't yet developed our NG9-1-1 rules. We don't have any NG9-1-1 rules yet, and so it'd be premature to speak about what entities our rules would apply to before we even have any rules on the books yet.
Okay. Are relay services being considered in NG9-1-1 planning and assessment?
Oh yeah, yes. They are being considered, and again, the CISRIC committee, or not the CISRIC, I'm sorry, the Emergency Access Advisory Committee that's developing the recommendations to the Commission in December of this year is exploring all of those relay issues.
Okay. And where can we find information about the actual CISRIC working groups? Is the information published on the FCC website, and how can we find out about participating?
You could go to the Commission's website. We do have, I believe we have a CISRIC web page, but I know we have all of the information on CISRIC on our website. And as far as participating in CISRIC, Brian, would you suggest if they want to participate on your committee that they reach out to you, or how do you think that should?
And we have, typically the process is that if there's, first off, go to the Commission's website, review the working groups, determine which working group you would have a particular interest in, and then identify the chairs, co-chairs for those working groups. Send your request to those co-chairs, and from that perspective, what we will then do is send those names on to the FCC. Jeffrey Goldthorpe, the FCC, is the liaison, if you will, for the chair of the CISRIC, and all of us who are working co-chairs to ensure that the names are vetted, and it's just a review process that is done internally, the commission, and then once the names are cleared, then we will notify the individual who is requesting to participate in a working group that the name has been cleared and they're eligible to participate in the working groups.
Okay. There are a number of questions about where people can find more information and additional resources on NG9-1-1 and deployment status, other major updates in NG9-1-1. First, I would recommend, obviously the NENA website, our NG9-1-1 project page has a subpage that has the status of NG9-1-1 related state activities. So that's a good place to start. Also following at FCC and at 911 NENA 911 on Twitter. Patrick, do you have any other resources you'd like to plug?
Well, of course, the FCC's website. But yeah, I would say your best bet would be to go to the NENA website. That's where you could probably find the most information on NG9-1-1 matters.
Great, and thank you. This gives me an opportunity to plug, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, our new website will be coming online on Monday, the 17th. That website has incredible functionality like never before, and there'll be a lot of opportunities to design the functionality to address specific issues and general issues associated with next generation 911 that we have already identified in the new website. And so I encourage you to go to that website and enjoy it, actually. Next question.
Okay. Okay. Even if PSAP equipment and networks are NG9-1-1 ready, the availability of accurate baseline of GIS data for call routing would be a showstopper. Does the FCC have a GIS point of contact working with existing available data from the Department of Homeland Security?
We do have a GIS point of contact. I'm going to have to look up his name for you. I don't know it offhand, but I know we have someone that handles those issues. And maybe your best bet would be to contact Brian or Trey at NENA. They can give you my email address, and I can put you in touch with the appropriate person at the FCC on those issues.
And the DHS, too. Yep.
Okay, terrific. Does the ongoing USF debate and recent state PUC chair comments have a bearing on this discussion?
Yeah, it does. We have talked with, we coordinate with the Wireline Competition Bureau at the FCC, and they're the ones who handle USF issues. They are aware of what we are doing, and they are, again, I'm not at liberty to speak about what, because we don't have any rules yet, but we are working with the bureau at the FCC very closely, who handles USF issues, and there may be some sort of overlap between the two, but we're exploring those issues.
Okay. What oversight does the FCC have with satellite service providers with the potential use of their network for reliability instead of traditional cable or ILEC entities?
Not sure I understand that question.
I think in my reading of it, Patrick, is just as we deal with 911, next generation 911, and reliability of the networks and so forth, if we're looking at satellite providers of communication services, be it text, video, voice, data, in a next generation 911 context, what regulatory authority would the FCC have over the satellite providers to ensure some form of reliability in their communication capabilities?
Gotcha. Frankly, I'm not too familiar with our satellite regulations, and so again, if someone wants to get my email address from Brian and contact me about that, I can make sure you get in touch with the right people here at the FCC. But that's just not I'm not familiar enough with those issues here. I apologize.
That's fair.
Okay, we're going to start winding it down here since we're coming up on the bottom of the hour. Will network security be JITC certified for military installations?
Network security, BJ. But that we're not. Brian, do you have?
Yeah, there's been. We've had some conversations with companies that provide 911 services and other services on military bases, particularly as it relates to next generation 911. Of course, the number of issues surrounding that is just the overall security of communications on military bases writ large. And so there is some preliminary discussions about that. I'm not sure if this has been raised with the Commission at this point, but certainly in terms of what the Commission has issued in the NPRM, I think there's an opportunity to raise this type of question or concern so that it is at least referenced in the docket, perhaps for future study by the Commission and with perhaps Department of Defense.
All right, I think we're going to have to take one more question, and then we'll thank everyone for their participation today. Will the FCC have any responsibility in regulating CLECs who want to provide local 911 trunking?
We're exploring that now. We have been in discussions with the counties of Southern Illinois. I'm not sure if I don't know if we call them definitely wouldn't. I don't think they'd like to be called a CLEC here, but the FCC will play a role in that issue. Will potentially play a role in that issue. We have some work left to do to see where we're heading on that front.
And I assume you're going to also have to coordinate that with the old Common Carrier Bureau or the Wireline Competition Bureau.
Yep. Yeah, that's who handles our interconnection type issues at the FCC, and we have been meeting with them on the local CLEC issues.
Great. Thank you. We are at the half hour. I want to thank Patrick. There have been over 600 registered for this webinar. I think that's outstanding. And Patrick, as always, you continue to do a remarkable job. I hope David is feeling a little bit better. Sorry he couldn't be on the webinar with you to help share the load. But we look forward to continuing working with you. We're always thankful to the Bureau for your openness and willingness to communicate with not only NENA but our members directly. And again, thank you very, very much for your time today.
Thank you. And just again to reiterate the comment dates, comments are due in this proceeding on December 12th, and reply comments are due on January 10th, 2012. And we really look forward to hearing from many of you.
Great. And for those who are new to NENA's webinars, we offer a variety of webinars throughout the year. We encourage you to go to our website to be aware of these webinars. And I want to thank you